For the audience that does not know you, feel free to introduce yourself.
Yep, my name is Vincent Rocco Vargas. I am a former special operations military member with 3 combat deployments, as well as in special operations for the Border Patrol. Did that for about 7 years. Wrote a book about it, and I also did some time in film and television, and with a television show called Mayans MC. And I currently work more in the mental health, wellness, and addiction space as a counselor, and going to school currently to finish my social worker's degree.
So, talk to me a little about, and for the audience that doesn't know, about what you do and what the day-to-day looks like of what you're doing.
Yeah, so my day, I work a lot on like several podcasts, but as well as my specific thing is during the day, I work doing a docu-series for the Border Patrol. You can find that on the Border Patrol's YouTube channel called Edge of a Nation. And so I go to different borders and I kind of embed with the Border Patrol and show them what the job is essentially day in and day out. And I also host a podcast of theirs called Into the Fringe. And so that's the day job, right? Outside of that, then I focus on another podcast I have called Borderland. That is a deeper look into interviewing some of the experts of the border crisis, whether that be on any side of the narrative, just experts. That's doing pretty well. That's produced by Ironclad. And then I have the Vincent Rocco Podcast, which focuses a lot on mental health and wellness.
So let's get right into it. So over the past, I want to say 4 years, actually I could even say 8 years, there's been a lot of talk about the border, right? A lot of talk. Especially when Trump became president. That's kind of what his whole thing was. He wanted to build a wall, which, didn't basically come out the way that, I think people expected it to, because that got stopped by the Biden administration. And now it seems like there was this tremendous influx of illegal immigrants and illegal violence by those immigrants. The infamous case of Laken Riley, and then you get Donald Trump on stage saying, the Haitians are eating the cats and the dogs, and, everybody's blaming Biden administration for not doing anything, but then Republicans blocked it. So it's a lot of back and forth.
Yeah.
My question to you is, why is the border crisis as bad as it is right now? What was the catalyst for it all?
Well, I think there's two things. There's what's actually happening on the border and what policies that are kind of, put into place. And then the other side is what the media is kind of doing and stirring a pot. And so what's happening, with the Biden administration was that they changed policy for pretty much anyone who comes across illegally can claim asylum. And when someone claims asylum, it is the Border Patrol agents and Customs who actually does the paperwork at that point. And then from there, what happens is those individuals get, because there is no system in place where we can house them while trying to determine their case. They get a notice to appear, which is a paper that pretty much says show up at a later time to speak to an immigration judge so they can determine your case, whether it's valid or not. Those are so backed up that you got somewhere else close to 4 years, 5 years of people waiting just for the immigration judge to make a determination of their case. And so that's the reality, is that currently the policy, there are people who are coming in, as soon as they claim asylum, they're allowed into the country with an NTA. And, so that's the thing. It's considered to be they're in status, right? So they're not illegal anymore since they're claiming asylum and they're waiting for their status to be determined by an immigration judge. But it's kind of a loophole in our system that either there's neglect or complete oversight. Don't understand what happened there, right? So that's where we had the massive influx. But at the same time, you have massive influx of those who are not even being apprehended, right? Who weren't even being identified. Those are called gotaways. And they determined something close to 10 million gotaways over the past 4 years or so, or something like that. Maybe it was a little less than that, but the gotaways is ones that you can't really calculate how many really is. It's kind of a roundabout number. You see 10 feet print at the wall, then you go all the way down to the road that's about a couple miles up, and you see 10 feet print. There's no one there. Well, you assume they got picked up, and so that's a rough estimate of numbers. And so the truth is, yeah, we had a massive influx of immigration because the cartel knew what was happening. The system that was put into place by our U.S. government wasn't sufficient enough to kind of slow it down or create any kind of deterrence. And, that's just the case. The hard part is the media's version of that was both sides of the fence. Biden's doing a great job, and then the other side is like, oh, that's an open border. And so that made things really difficult because most people who aren't well versed in the subject get their news and information from the media, and they hold it all as facts. And a lot of what the media is doing currently right now is just pushing a narrative and not giving the full wholehearted truth. They're creating fear mongering. They're creating all kinds of different things.
So, a big counterpoint that a lot of people tend to give, because a lot of times when I've said, what the Biden administration is, and look, I'm not a big fan of Trump, by the way. I just want to say that, I think he's done good things and bad things like every president. But when we're talking about Biden's administration, when you offer the point that Biden and his administration kind of didn't do much about the illegal immigration problem, most people will counter that point with, yeah, but they did offer a bill and that bill got blocked by Republicans in Congress. What's your stance on that?
Yes, but the bill was not solely focused on just the U.S.-Mexico border. The bill actually had different things with Ukraine involving as well. And so when you start doing that and you start allocating money, saying, oh, yeah, we'll sign this bill, but this portion of that bill says that this much money goes to Ukraine, well, then you're not really focusing on a border bill. You're focusing on a kind of a bill to kind of hide some of the other, things that they're, the other initiatives that they're hoping to get passed as well. That doesn't make things comfortable. As well as when you said a border bill, like, if you read through that bill, it wasn't the greatest option. It was an option, right? But what was already in place before the administration got in was just as good. What Trump had put into play was a solid action, right? It was actually working well. The one I would say that we can all criticize was the separating the children from their parents. That was a big confusing thing. I understand the sentiment and the idea of what it was, but it didn't look good, and it made a lot of people uncomfortable to kind of watch what that looked like. Again, the media turned that into something bigger than what it was. The issue that I would say is, during this Biden administration, there was so much more than just, massive influx. The 300,000 missing children that were supposed to be put into some kind of system that was lost because of lack of oversight for the NGOs. Those are the things we should be concerned about moving forward and how we change that so that doesn't happen again, right? I think, a lot of people put the focus on Trump and saying, he was harsh, but they forget about Obama, who was even harder, right? Who had deported more immigrants than any other president before him, right? And so, if the system stayed from what the Obama administration put into action and then what Trump administration put into action, if it just stayed in that space and we continued to work on that, we would have been in a good place because it wouldn't have had this massive influx in the last 4 years. But it didn't. It kind of, I felt like it was a decision based on not wanting to give Trump any credit because of, all the political kind of like undertones of you're wrong, I'm right. And I think that it kind of really hurt the immigration stance of what we have in America right now. And I think it's a big reason why the voting went the direction it went, because we can all see what's happening, and it was pretty uncomfortable for any side of the argument, whatever the narrative was.
So do you think that Trump is the solution to this? Because
we only had two options, and it wasn't going to be the Biden administration and Kamala Harris again, right? You know what I mean? Trump was the only option we had. Come here. And so, not saying that Trump's not a good option. I'm saying anyone who wants to focus on the border is the right option. Anyone who's going to do something is the right option. Right now, there's nothing really being done. There has to be some form of deterrence, meaning not everyone should be able to claim asylum. There has to be some kind of parameters on that asylum, case. At the same time, hold on, my daughter wants me to fix her iPad real quick. At the same time, there you go. Anyone that's going to focus on building that relationship with Mexico and trying to make sure that stays, at the forefront of our relationships with Mexico, whether they're going to house, or help with their own deterrence from the other countries as well, right? So there's a lot of layers to that, but who is the right answer? Well, as the two that we were allowed to vote for, you know what I mean? Trump was the better option because he did make good strides during his time, and he spoke well about what his plan was next. A little intimidating, to be honest, in my position where I sit as someone who's spent time on the border, someone who really cares about this subject. I'm curious to see what mass deportation, right? Mass deportation looks like, does it look, is it going to look like the Hunger Games? You know what I mean? Or is it going to be something that is, that is humane, right? That is done appropriately in some fashion. And what that looks like, I have no idea.
So I gotta ask, you're of Spanish descent?
I'm Hispanic. Yes, I'm half Mexican, half Puerto Rican.
Okay, so I gotta ask, are your parents immigrants?
No, my grandparents were
Okay,
on my mother's side. Puerto
all right.
Ricans are American no matter what.
Yeah. Well, no, I asked because my dad is actually an immigrant. So,
Cool.
you
From
know,
where?
Argentina. Yeah, he was
Beautiful.
born. Yeah, he was born in Argentina. Great place. No, I just didn't know if that was at all personal. The matter.
I think it's all personal because I care about humanity and I care about people and I care about America, so I do. We're a country that allows legal immigration. We have a system in place. And so when people bypass that system, one, it offends those who have done it the appropriate way. And then two, it raises the risk of our homeland security, right? Who is coming into this country, right? So it's the same in your house and you have a front door. You want to know who's allowed to come in and who's not, who knocks, and whether you give them permission to enter or not, right? It's the same exact system, but for some reason, the emotions get involved here and people start thinking about, their own public safety. They just start thinking like, oh, let them all in. It's like, that's not how a country works, that it's bounded by borders.
I've always said this. I would love to be able to live in a world without borders, but unfortunately, that's not the world we can live in.
Correct.
I would love the
Correct.
ability to walk to Canada and to China and to Russia and to wherever, but unfortunately, that's not the world we live in.
Correct.
Going from there, what do you think of the comment that Trump made about the Haitians eating the cats and the dogs, right, as part of the illegal immigrant, I guess, that he was giving?
Yeah, he wasn't wrong. I think as someone who's a president-elect at the time, right, or as a president someone who's running for president, should be more mindful of how they use their platform and the words that they use. But he wasn't totally incorrect. There was a woman who just got sentenced recently for eating a cat on a driveway that was Haitian in Ohio, right? Like, so it was an accurate depiction of what he was seeing out there, and those other Haitians who were grabbing the ducks from the local little lake and eating them as well. And so that's all proven to be facts. It's just when he has the platform he has, with the eyes on him, as well as all the controversial topics towards him. Anything he says is being flipped and twisted even worse. He was right. That was true. But if it was me in that situation, I would choose my words more wisely.
What do you think, if anything, is being covered up about the immigration crisis?
It's there's a lot of money that was spent in the immigration crisis, as well as the money that was given to the the NGOs, the non-government organizations, that I believe they lost oversight, and people were getting paychecks for doing nothing. I think the NGOs is a concern of mine. How much money I did a interview with a lady from Borderline, from Borderland, my podcast, a lady named Maddie something, but she did a full investigation on the NGOs and how much money they're receiving. And you had the CEOs of some of these NGOs making over 800,000 a year, and those are the ones who are losing the control of the unaccompanied minors, right? Like, if you're getting paid that much, you should probably have more control, more documentation of how you handle those situations. And so the oversight was disgusting to see the money that was given out to these NGOs, and as well as how much money we spent on just the processing of housing all these migrants who came across, and the fooding and the educations and the medical, like, all that stuff was pretty crazy. And so I think you're going to see a dramatic drop in funding on how we handle things in the near future if Trump puts into action the same thing that Obama put into action, is some kind of deterrence mechanism, meaning penalties, harsher penalties for coming across illegally outside of a port of entry. When you change the list of those who are actually allowed to seek asylum based on what's going on in their country. And you have probably more immigration judges so we can kind of do our due diligence and see those cases sooner. You'll start to see, I think, a place where we're saving a lot more money. It costs money to deport just as much as it costs money to keep them here and house them. But we need to do the right thing by sending them back to their country and repatriate them with their own nation.
You mentioned the cartels at one point.
Yeah.
So I guess, the cartels are some of the most opportunistic people out there. But when you get things like fentanyl as well coming in, and, there's a big talk about fentanyl, and as of right now, especially in the past few years, where does that kind of come into play? Is it just being shipped through the borders now, like more than ever? Like, is that part of the crisis? Like, are they intertwined?
Yeah, well, what's been documented is that China's the one who supplies them with the precursors to making it, and then they're making it there in Mexico, which makes it a lot easier for them to transport, but as well as the cost is cheaper and they can make more, and so then they can make hand over fist type money for very little work. And so, yeah, that's a huge concern. I think the biggest concern that we should be paying attention to is our own demand, right? We're the ones who are consuming the product. We're the ones who have the biggest demand for drugs. And so we have to look within ourselves and our own government and see, why is it that our country and our culture is completely infused and addicted to these drugs? That's a big question, because if it wasn't for us being the ones who are purchasing it, there would not be, such a massive influx of drugs needed.
Why do you think that the Biden administration chose to do nothing about it, or chose to do very little about it?
I don't know. Originally, they had Kamala Harris as the border czar. You would imagine that would fall into the border czar's position of influence. For some reason, they just did not take actions on things that I thought they should have. And it was almost as if it was ignored, pushed to the side. And so I have no idea. I have no answers to why anyone would have just allowed it to get so bad. I'm just excited that we at least have some kind of buzz of actions that are going to be made once this, administration gets turned over.
Well, wasn't Kamala Harris the border czar? Was not she in charge of the border?
Well, that's what I'm saying. She was the one who was supposed to be dedicated to that focus, which would mean drugs would fall into that same, projection, I assume. But it was all kind of, the ball was dropped, and I didn't understand it, and no one could answer it. And during the political debates, she couldn't answer it, and so it was just kind of this continue to sweep it under the rug and let's not talk about it. And I think that's a big reason why a lot of the American people voted the way they did, because they were frustrated with not having answers.
Oftentimes, the answer can be found through the money, right? Where the money is and what people are gaining benefits from it. So, there was a lot of rumors about how these people could still vote, and there was a lot of concern about these people being able to vote, and that having something to do with the election, and Kamala Harris somehow using that. Do you think that there was any merit to that?
A lot of people say that, right? That's a big argument. Like, yeah, they're bringing on voters. I don't necessarily believe that wholeheartedly. A lot of migrants become Republicans because their work ethics, they start paying taxes, like, what the hell? This sucks, right? Like, a lot of different things. You'll start to see a lot of the entrepreneurs, and a lot of migrants become entrepreneurs. A lot of them own their own businesses, whether it be restaurants. It doesn't matter, whatever it is. And so they start leaning more towards kind of the Republican ideologies. And so if you're bringing in a bunch of, migrants thinking that they're all going to vote Democrat because of the fact that they're letting them in, I think that's just a lack of the big picture. Like, oh, keep voting for them, they're going to let more of us in. I don't know if that's a thing. I'm not saying it's not. Okay, I'll say that. Yeah, there's probably a small percentage of that. But I do think there's a majority of people that are coming across that are looking to make this home. And why would you want to make this home and then turn it back into the home that you ran from? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, there's a big portion of migrants who are coming across illegally because they don't know any better, or they've been manipulated to do so by the cartel, or they've had to. They had their hands tied. Okay, one second, baby. And so since their hands are tied on this, they're gonna go across illegally, and they're gonna come into America, and they're gonna find a way to work, and they're gonna find a way to make money for their families. And the biggest part about that is then they're gonna sit and be like, we like the safety and the community of this. We are making good money. How do you protect this to not get back to where their country is, for Venezuela or Colombia, whatever it is that they ran from, that they're coming here to hopefully have a sanctuary in a place where they can make money for their families. So I think it's more in the middle of that. I think that's what some people thought. I think a lot of people use that as an easy argument, but I think it's deeper than that. Allowing this many migrants, illegal migrants, to come into America was confusing for me. I didn't understand why there were so many benefits for them as well, when we have veterans who are homeless in the street, right? We have veteran benefits that are kind of being ignored, but migrants were getting free this and free that, free medical, like all this different stuff. And it was kind of like, man, it is very strange to watch any kind of government ignored its own people and focus on a different community. You know what I'm saying? Or at least first. I don't mind us taking care of countries that needed it, right? But I would say we had to look within ourselves first to attack that. And so allowing people to come in for votes, I think that's an easy argument, but I don't know if that's necessarily factual.
Well, an even more serious topic is the problem of sex trafficking and human trafficking.
Yep.
Where does that fall into play with all this?
Again, we are the biggest consumers. Sorry, I don't know if I can cuss, and if I can't, sorry about that. But I can't stand this subject in the sense of like, how is this such a big issue in America? It blows my mind. We're the biggest consumers of this, which makes it a very disgusting topic. And so if we weren't the biggest consumers of this, then there wouldn't be such a big influx of human trafficking, sex trafficking. I think it's disgusting. I think it's sad. And when you have kind of an open border, I don't like to use that term so much, but that's kind of what we had the past 4 years. You're allowing it to exist even easier, right? You're giving it a space to exist with almost free flow of traffic. The tunnel they just found in El Paso, who knows? There was part of intel was told to me from a reporter on the street, was that it was used for trafficking women, especially from Venezuela. Well, then that's telling me that's a sex trafficking tunnel, or you know what I mean? And that is a very scary subject. And so when you, like you said, when you have the border situation the way it is, you're allowing drugs, you're allowing sex trafficking, human trafficking happening just by way of fact of not doing anything about it, by not slowing it down.
Well, just a not so fun fact: over 100,000 people go missing every year. Number one, within the United States, like I think it's 50 to over 100,000. And number two, there are more slaves, trafficked people now than at any other point in history.
Yeah.
Right. So even when it was legal, there's more of them now. I mean, get into the infamous cases of people like, Jeffrey Epstein, which, that's the most famous one, but it happens all the time. My personal stance, that guy was one of many, sadly. Right?
Absolutely.
And there's a million more of them that we don't even know about. Now we got people like Diddy coming out. I think we're going to see a lot more as time goes on, and it's only going to get worse and worse.
I don't know that's the problem. It only gets worse when no one does anything about it. When you have the Epstein case, why haven't they revealed his black book? Why haven't they done anything about it, right? Why hasn't anyone been persecuted from that? Same as the Diddy. Like, this only continues to happen when they keep doing things like that, when they block the names, when they don't allow everyone to know, when they don't start going after these people, because then you've created a system that almost allows it. Again, sweeps it under the rug. If we create an environment and a culture that actually destroys these people, puts them in prison or even death penalty, well, then you start to see it slow down because there'd be eyes on. Right now, there is no repercussion. You know what I mean? There is no repercussion for the whole Diddy situation, for the Epstein. The stories that come out about Diddy and the people that were with him, what happened there? Where's that? You see what I'm saying? Like, it'll slow down when we have a government that actually takes action on those things, when we actually when we actually, hold people accountable for their actions, that's when it'll start to slow down. It'll never go away. It's just the sick world we live in.
There is a seeming unspoken market and insane proliferation of pedophilia and human trafficking that's come out only in the past few years. And it's so horrible to watch it. I mean, we could talk about, whether it's Pornhub executives admitting on recordings saying, yeah, I would never be able to defend any of this in court. Yeah, we don't actually know if all the girls are of age. Yeah, there's still such easy exploits, and the guy who owns Pornhub is worth over $2 billion, and there's only one picture of him online because he doesn't want to be associated with it. Like, that's a very famous one. The woman who actually exposed that went on Jordan Peterson's podcast recently. But now to see the insanity of the loopholes that are being found and allowed by the country, like the United States as well, doesn't make it much better.
Yeah.
And I guess my question to you is, what is some of the worst parts of this crisis? What have you seen that you kind of want to warn people about because it's not talked about enough?
No, I think we as Americans should pay attention to our own kids and the things that they do through social media, like Roblox. Like that's a big one for pedophiles right now, for pedophiles to speak to kids. A lot of online gaming. We just kind of, people are starting to let their kid go to their room and play the online gaming, not realizing who they're communicating with and who's connected to those accounts. Our kids are the biggest threats. We are the biggest consumers of pedophilia in America. That means that they're here in America. That's means, like, those of you focusing on the border, stop. Look within yourself here in this country and say, what are some things in the means of access to our kids? It is social media, mainstream media. When I see kids have Snapchat, I'm like shocked. I'm like, what the heck is that parent allowing their kid to have Snapchat? Like, oh no, I'm paying attention. Like, no, you're not enough. Snapchat is one that none of these kids should ever have. All of our kids have their phones, so we can see everything that happens on their phones. If my son tries to do something on his phone, it immediately responds to my phone. I have great oversight over everything they do in communication because the threat is within. The threat is here in America, not just some other country. We're thinking about immigrants like this or illegal immigrants, right? No. We need to pay attention to our own kids and what they do, and that's the problem for me, is that this subject, we're the consumer. That's the scariest part. It's the same as drugs. I always think, like, man, there's two parts to this. Yeah, the cartel is fucking making hand over fist money. Yeah, the government's not stopping the border. Yeah, Mexico's kind of allowing it all to happen. But yeah, we're still the reasons why, because we're the ones who buy the drugs and we're the ones who purchase and make all the sex trafficking and everything else. So we have an internal issue that we need to pay attention to.
With regards to the border and what you've seen and what you've covered, what have you covered or what have you seen that you kind of want to go more into detail with, you kind of want to look into a bit more in the future?
Something I've been focusing on a lot recently is the level of training of the cartel. In preparation for, if for some reason, this government decides that we want to go into Mexico, if they get deemed as a terrorist organization, then, the ROE changes or the rules of engagement would change, where we could potentially do a cross-border operations legally, right, by way of Mexico supporting it. And so I've been researching a lot about what is the actual training level of the cartel. What are they capable of doing? I've been watching a lot of the things they're doing now currently in their own rules of engagement, if you will. They have a pretty high level of drone capability. That's a pretty intimidating thing. We've seen what they're using in Ukraine, from the war in Russia and Ukraine, and how they're using those capabilities to be very disruptive. And so we know that, the CJNG, they have their own drone team. And so that's something that we should be paying attention to as Americans. But as well as what kind of tactics they use outside of that. Are they able to enter and clear rooms like the U.S. forces do? Do they use, explosive breaching? What kind of vehicles? What kind of armor? All that stuff is what I'm currently looking a lot into because I find it to be one, just fascinating. It's something that I know very well, like tactics of war and strategic, kind of operations. And so that to me is probably the next major potential threat that I want to kind of learn and hopefully be able to tell the story for our own for our own services. If for some reason that happened, we would be better prepared.
So, what do you think? Why do you think that Trump, when he was president for the first 4 years, didn't label the cartels as a terrorist organization, considering that they have the capabilities of a military and operate much more like a terrorist organization than even a business? Why didn't he?
I think a big problem that we have is that we have to do re-elections every 4 years. So then it's like a whole thing. It takes a long time to be able to get that done, as well as to build a relationship with Mexico enough for them to support what we do after that. Uh, I don't know why he didn't make that decision, but what he did do was substantial of what happened on the borders, right? When you talked about earlier, like he said he was going to build the wall, didn't quite do it. Well, he did. He started to build the wall and he started building it in areas that needed it, right? And he was going to continue to build it until the Biden administration stopped it. And then the Biden administration later on decides, oh, maybe we need to continue this, right? And so the wall's been built. It's been getting built since even the Obama era. And so that just became a means of a conversation to kind of kind of attack Trump. But like he put things into action. Maybe it was part of a leveled approach to the border, and that was probably later on. Don't know, but I know it's something that they're talking heavily now, and so that's going to be pretty interesting to see.
When we're talking about the cartel, one thing that often gets the public isn't aware of, and I feel like they absolutely should be, is the military capabilities of the cartels.
Yeah.
The fact that there's an organization that's selling drugs, across our borders and has the capacity of a military is so strange to me. And they have their own cell phone services, they have drones, they have all this. Why, or rather, how? What's some of the capabilities that they have that most people aren't aware of? If you could kind of talk a little bit about that.
Well, just look at their capabilities of being able to build a tunnel from Mexico to America, right? That capability alone is probably people over. It's an oversight that no one really thinks about. Like that capability alone to be able to do that, where we can't even determine it, we can't even identify it. That's pretty special, right? That's kind of like that's a threat. Outside of that, besides the tunnel capability, I think just the fact that they have military capability. So remember back in the day, the United States Special Forces trained in GAFE. They trained them in tactics, right? What were those tactics? Well, I have a exclusive interview with the gentleman who was in charge of that program, and he talked about what are the things they taught them? Pretty much the basics of what special forces would use in any kind of capacity, right? Nothing too extreme. But to build off of that means that these individuals know how to do patrolling. They know how to do the basics of CQB, close quarter combat, right? They know how to do basic shoot, move, communicate, which can be very valuable in any kind of threat scenario. They understand how to do blocking positions. They understand how to use crew served weapons. And so these are there's levels of that are fascinating because they were started to be military trained by us, and then now they've kind of grown into that. And then those Zetas and then others who kind of branched off into other parties. Now you got the CJ&G. They have vehicles. They have the guns. They have the armor. They have all that I mentioned earlier. But they also have social media, and they also have a culture behind them that loves them. They have the young demographic who enjoys the fame and notoriety. Those are the hip hop stars of our country, right? Those are the cool kids, and so the young crowd wants to be more like them. And when they do that, man, they've done more. That's a psychological operations. That's what they've done. They've done a psyop that have convinced the young generation that it is cool to be a cartel member.
What do you think is the biggest lesson that you've learned since covering the border?
It's that the cartels reach, and and who their whole capabilities does not stay at the border. They reach all the way into America. There's cartel connections in every major city, one near you, one near me. And so it's one of those things where we all need to be very mindful of that and understand that the threat is deep. It is woven into our own country already, and so it is a big concern that we need to start addressing.
Why do you think domestically there's been such a lack of attention, especially by agencies like the DEA, the FBI, the ATF, when they absolutely have every authority and capability to do so? Government
I think,
incompetence. Yeah, I was going to finish up by saying government incompetence seems to be the answer.
yeah, I don't know. I've once leaving the federal government as a law enforcement officer, I've always been curious to why can't we shut this down? And you know, just like at every case, you need evidence, and you need evidence to be collected correctly, and then you need a DA to go ahead and you know, I don't know. I'm watching a lot with TDA, right? Tren de Agua, and watching what they're doing, and it's just fascinating to see how fast they're growing in our major cities and how they're making impacts, like negative impacts, and how we haven't been slowing them down, or it's hard to stop them. I don't understand it, and I wish I did, because I think it's becoming a big threat for all of us.
What do you think the answer is for the border?
I think harsher punishment for those who come over illegally, right? I think we do have to build out our robust system, which would be, some of them are walls, some of them are more technology, some of them are more seismic meters, some of them are more agents, right? Just depends. Every area is different. Once we have to establish that, I think people need to go to jail for a period of time, so that it starts to deter the rest of the illegal immigrants that come across. They don't want to go to jail that long. On top of that, we need to build relationships with these other countries and get them to repatriate their own people. We need to help them build their own infrastructure and their economy, so that people want to stay in their own country. We need to build them up instead of break them down. America spent many years kind of destabilizing other countries just by way of, different things. And so I think it's time for us to kind of start being better about building those relationships, helping those countries, as well as educating how to do this system, how to do it legally in our system.
Do you think the military should be used against the cartels?
Ooh, it's a good question. I think it's a hard. It reminds me of Afghanistan and Iraq, when you got ISIS, Al Qaeda, you know, and they all look the same. They're just kind of factions of each other, kind of thing. Kind of, if I can say it that way, factions maybe. But I imagine we could be creating more cartel just based on people, the kids being pissed that we went into their country, and it's going to be a long event that leads to nothing, right? I think, it's funny. I've had 4 people, I think, now on my podcast, the Borderland podcast, who has said legalizing drugs would be the answer, and that is a fascinating topic, because I would never in my life say, yeah, that sounds right. Hell no, it sounds crazy. But then you start to look at it like, wait, we've done a lot of the other options and nothing's worked. It's only gotten worse. So what if we regulate drugs in a way that's legalized, like like you did marijuana? And those who want to use it. And in some capacity, owning it in the sense of making the money off it, taxing it and making it a business. Then the people who want to use drugs will go use drugs. And there no longer will be this illegal black market of drugs. I don't know. It's an interesting thought.
I think we should legalize all drugs and then take all the dealers in Mexico and we should just put them in the same prison together. And we gotta put that prison, because their crimes are not just drugs. Their crimes
Right.
are everything from sex trafficking to child murder to everything in between. So
Yeah.
I don't even consider them drug lords at this point. They're terrorists and nothing more. So,
Why don't you serve in any law enforcement capacity?
Because I don't think that's where my talent should be put. I don't think it's my job to do. However, I do plan on running for president one day. So,
Do you?
yeah,
All right.
many, 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 many years from now. So,
Yeah.
hopefully the crisis is solved by then. But if it's not, knowing how slow the government is, I'll be happy to solve it.
Awesome. Well, hey, I got to wrap this up in a little bit. I have
All right.
another guest, but go
Any
ahead with
final
you.
words to the audience?
No, man, I really appreciated this interview. I think we got to pay more attention to our borders. We got to pay attention more to our country internally, right? We got to see, why are we the biggest consumers of these products? That's the question, right? So what's happening in your family? What's happening within, us as Americans, and why are we losing our morals and values? Why are we struggling with addiction so hard, right? So we got to look into that. And outside of that, if you guys have more questions, check out my book, Borderline, that explains a lot about the border, from a kind of very neutral kind of position. So thank you.
All right. I'm going to stop the recording and talk a little bit after the show. All right. In 3, 2, 1.